Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 2nd issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And I will start with the headline on the front page, which says, "We see the rise. Snowbirds and temperatures soar at Canada Day celebrations." And there's a photograph of a couple looking up to the sky, and there's Canadian flags, and the snowbirds are soaring overhead in formation. And it says the snowbirds streak across the sky during a Canada Day event in Ottawa as the country marked 159 years of Confederation. And the article continues inside. Second here. The article on the inside has another headline which reads, "Heat, Hype, and High Spirits. World Cup fever and severe weather warning make for a sweltering Canada Day in City." And this is by May Warren. On the eve of the city's final World Cup match, soccer fans from around the world enjoyed a sweltering Canada Day in Toronto, even if most can't afford tickets to the big match on Thursday. There were plenty of people in Canada soccer kits at a sweaty East York Canada Dry parade, which included a Mountie on stilts, a juggler in a red and white pinstripe suit, and a giant blow-up maple leaf. Mayor Olivia Chow was there too, decked out in her own Canada jersey. Asked how she was staying cool, she joked that she was a cool person, urging residents to drink lots of water, stay in the shade, take advantage of cooling centers, and enjoy Canada Day. "We are cheering Team Canada," she added, "a country where all are welcome and all belong." Toronto remains under a severe weather warning for a long-duration heat event, with temperatures potentially reaching up to 37 C in some of the areas this week. The Environment Canada orange warning alerts people to watch for signs of heat exhaustion and check in on older adults, those living alone, and other at-risk people. As of 3 p.m., the high was 35 Celsius at Pearson Airport, with a scorching humidex of 46. Toronto's record temperature for July 1 is 36 Celsius. Andre Pereira, 15, was visiting the city with his family from Brasilia, Brazil, to cheer on the soccer at the FIFA Fan Festival. Wearing the red and black colors of Flamengo, one of Brazil's most popular football clubs, Pereira called the weather pretty hot from a cool spot inside the Eaton Center. "We like it hot because we're used to this temperature," he said. The city's final match at the World Cup is a round of 32 game between Portugal and Croatia that will see stars Cristiano Ronaldo and Luka Modric face off at Toronto Stadium at 7 p.m. on Thursday, with temperatures still forecast for the mid-30s Celsius. Tickets for Toronto's World Cup send-off have been out of reach for many fans and have been listed for as high as $24,600 on the secondary market, the Star previously reported. The Buffon family, who live in Toronto, braved the heat to come downtown to Nathan Phillips Square, where temporary soccer pitches were set up for fans. Mom Zorana Buffon is Croatian. Her two kids were clad in that country's red and white jerseys. "It brings the whole city together," she said of the game tomorrow. "The world," added her husband, John Buffon, "they will likely watch the match from home. We're trying to get tickets, but tickets are priced through the roof," Zorana said. As for the heat, she loves it. "It's Canada, and I've been waiting for this," Zorana said. Andrea and Barbara Raffini, who were posing for family photos near the Toronto sign at Nathan Phillips Square, were visiting from Tuscany, Italy, with their 12-year-old son, Tommaso. They came for a holiday, said Barbara, but were happy that it coincided with the World Cup, even if Italy didn't make it. It's just a vacation, but of course, to be here for the championship is nice, she said. We wanted to go tomorrow, said Andrea. It's a big one. The family tried to get tickets from Italy, but they were too expensive. No luck either with last-minute tickets, so they will probably watch from Nathan Phillips Square. As for the heat, it's very hot, but in Italy, it's more hot, Andrea said. Europe remains in the grips of a record-breaking heat wave that has seen temperatures records topple, with health officials reporting hundreds of heat-related deaths. Nearby, the Rafinis, Hudaifa Ait El Kadi was lounging in the grass in a red Morocco jersey with some friends. He's lived in Canada for 4 years and is excited to watch Canada play Morocco in the round of 16 on Saturday. Morocco narrowly defeated the Netherlands this week. I'm going to go with Morocco, he said, but if Canada wins, for me, they deserve it as well. The city has set up mobile drinking water stations at Nathan Phillips Square, Mel Lastman Square, East York Civic Center, and Barbara Hall Park, which will remain on site until the heat warning is lifted, except for the station at Nathan Phillips Square, which will remain in place throughout the World Cup. Also from the front page, the next article is titled, Oshawa weighs lofty idea to ease traffic congestion, but gondola proposal quickly brought back down to earth. This is by Alisha Hasham. As a way to ease the gridlock clogging Oshawa's major artery, the idea dangling before council seemed alluring. It offered a solution to Simcoe Street's legendary traffic woes that would require far less space than a dedicated bus lane and could be built 3 years faster. It would be initially more expensive to install than a busway, $1.1 billion compared to $800 million, but the annual costs would be lower and there would be more opportunity to grow ridership. The catch? The seemingly desirable option was for an aerial cable car. The plan would take a form of transport most familiar from ski resorts and theme parks and create a 13-kilometer-long commuter line above Simcoe Street. There was initially support for the idea that would put Oshawa among the first cities in Canada to take the leap into urban cable cars. It was first proposed by Durham Region in 2022 as one of several rapid transit options in a visioning study. After public consultations, regional staff narrowed the options down to 2. A dedicated bus lane and a gondola. A feasibility study on the cable car option was done in 2024, and the upside touted in an optimistic staff presentation last year. But as quickly as a plan to decongest Oshawa's version of Yonge Street reached new heights, political reality may have brought the lofty transit dream back to earth. Many of us would suggest it was dead on arrival, said Oshawa Councillor Brian Nicholson, who represents one of the wards covered by the proposed gondola route. It is the dumbest suggestion I've heard in 40 years of public service. What some see as a pie-in-the-sky vision is grounded in an inescapable demographic reality. Almost half of Oshawans live or work within 1 kilometer of Simcoe Street, a corridor that also serves universities, Lake Ridge Health, Oshawa, and the downtown, and the area is only growing. The current bus route along the road is already one of the busiest in Durham, with demand outstripping capacity, making it hard to give up a lane to a busway, according to a business case prepared by the region. Without any rapid transit option in place, traffic is projected to double by 2051. Commuters are currently experiencing an extra level of traffic nightmare on Simcoe, with long-term road closures for the Central Oshawa GO station construction and Highway 401 widening, Nicholson has said. And the road itself creates challenges for the introduction of any type of rapid transit. There is so little space available to widen it that apartments would have to be torn down to make room for a dedicated busway, said Nicholson. And the region's staff dismissed the much cheaper option of just adding more frequent buses because they would just get stuck in the congestion that already exists. A gondola would require much less incursion into private properties, according to the region. But the novelty of the concept can hold a lot of sway for cautious decision makers. It is an unusual thought for North America, said Mike Dippering, a senior consultant with SCJ Alliance, who worked on the feasibility study for the Oshawa project. But I think it's gaining traction. The gondola, as an environmentally friendlier and less disruptive type of urban transit line, has become increasingly popular in countries around the world, including France, Bolivia, and Mexico. Last year, Paris opened a 4.5-kilometer cable car line connecting the metro system to the suburbs. There are also 2 established commuter-style tramways in the U.S., one in Portland, which has been operational since 2006, and the Roosevelt Island Tramway in New York across the East River might be an inspiration for another way to connect people to the Toronto Islands. A plan to build one in Burnaby connecting Simon Fraser University to a SkyTrain stop appears to have stalled despite public support, while in Los Angeles, a controversial connection from its Union Station to Dodger Stadium is inching forward. It may be hard to imagine commuting via cable car here, but promoters say the technology is designed to function even through rough Canadian winters at wind speeds of up to 80 kilometers per hour. Picture a cabin big enough to hold about 20 people, moving slowly through 17 stations, with a new one stopping every 30 seconds to a minute or so. You know, in most cases, they're probably going to do a lot better in bad weather than a bus, said Deparing, adding many of the safety concerns people have, like being left dangling above a busy road, can be addressed through training and preparation by the operators and local first responders. The system proposed for Oshawa would require about 43 towers, each about 250 meters apart, fewer than a traditional cable car system. I got to get to the top here. Okay, and with smaller stations. But the report notes that the system is relatively new, with only one manufacturer and one project in the Swiss mountains, which could present challenges for actual procurement. Deparing, who is working on the Los Angeles project, said a gondola is not a panacea for all traffic jam woes, but can make sense when faced with difficult terrain or, like in Oshawa, a lack of space to work with on the ground. And it's much, much cheaper than going underground. While public consultations initially showed support for the innovative idea, it has also been met with ridicule by many in Oshawa, including local politicians, and become a punchline about questionable spending in regional council meetings. Like you, I will never see a gondola on Simcoe Street, said Durham Regional Chair John Henry to Oshawa Councilor Tito Dante Mirimpetri, who brought up the idea when discussing the challenges in funding a new police station in Ajax in May. It's a disaster, a complete and total farce, Mirimpetri said in a later interview. It's when government goes wild and executes on absolutely nothing that anyone's ever asked to do and then presents it as though it's something that's important to the public. The idea now seems to have been left hanging in Oshawa, with no further planning for it being approved by Durham Regional Council, despite voting for staff to provide further information about it last spring. Staff continue to explore solutions, not specific to a single option, in order to make recommendations to Council about the future of Simcoe Street Rapid Transit. A spokesperson for the region said in a statement, "There is no timeline for when the report will land. The only way out for the gridlock on Simcoe that Nicholson can see is more transit offshoots, like the ghost train station in the works. I'd rather spend the funds that we have for transit on improving our outreach from the main spines of the city into our residential communities so we can move people more efficiently around the city as opposed to concentrating everything on one street," he said. "If the federal government had $1 billion they wanted to give to Oshawa, I could think of hundreds of better ideas to spend that money on than some kind of gondola situation." And I need to pause here and remind you you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article is also from the front page, and it is under the byline of CUSMA. U.S. says it won't extend trade accord. North American deal now subject to annual reviews. This is by Tonda McCharles. Ottawa. Canada, the U.S., and Mexico will not extend the Continental Free Trade Pact for another 16-year term, and instead will only secure the North American free trade market for the remaining decade while subjecting it to annual reviews. The decision, at the behest of the U.S., was confirmed during a virtual meeting Wednesday between U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and Mexico's Secretary of the Economy Marcelo Ebrard, thousands of kilometers apart. Greer's office announced the outcome, saying the U.S. did not agree to renew the USMCA in its current form. As a result, the USMCA is not renewed. The United States will continue to engage with Mexico and Canada to address the agreement's shortcomings and our trade deficits with these countries. However, the agreement remains in force pending resolution of these issues or until the agreement's termination. The decision, later confirmed by the Canadian government, was not unexpected. Afterward, LeBlanc said in a statement he had reaffirmed Canada's unwavering support for the CUSMA and its renewal. LeBlanc noted that the deal remains fully in force until 2036 and can be renewed at any time for another 16-year period. Mexico's Ebrard underscored the saying, "If Trump wanted to leave, the United States would have done it by now," he said. In the immediate term, the decision to enter a period of annual reviews changes little, but it will contribute to ongoing investment and business uncertainty. The Americans have made it official, said Brian Clough, a former top Canada-U.S. advisor to the Trudeau government. They want more concessions from Canada and Mexico, and they want the trade uncertainty to continue before they'll consider extending the agreement. The lack of surprise doesn't make it any easier for the sectors in the Canadian economy that are suffering, like automobiles and steel. Brian Kingston, head of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, said the decision by the U.S. underlines the need to negotiate a durable agreement that supports the integrated North American auto industry, because U.S. tariffs have made the industry uncompetitive compared to other jurisdictions around the world. Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, said the Americans could have chosen to declare they'd quit the deal, but instead they signaled they will continue to work with their partners on updating the terms that bind them as contemplated by the agreement. A Canadian official with knowledge of the discussions told the Star the tone of the virtual meeting was cordial and friendly, and the negotiators talked about the World Cup. However, it lasted only about an hour and followed a preset agenda for a structured conversation, said the official, who was not authorized to publicly discuss the details. Others attending included Canada's chief negotiator, Janice Charette, Mexico's Undersecretary of the Economy, Luis Rosendo Gutierrez, and Greer's deputies, Jeffrey Gottman and Dan O'Brien. There were no surprises, but the first trilateral meeting on whether to renew the pact was useful nonetheless, the source said, a sentiment later echoed by Mexico. Both Canada and Mexico raised U.S. sectoral tariffs on autos, steel, and aluminum, and Ebrard said that Canada and the U.S. raised concerns with Mexico about job losses, particularly in the manufacturing sector, and growing reliance on other countries. In response, Ebrard proposed increasing production on the continent. He told reporters, "Let's not have tariffs among us, and let's coordinate to produce more in North America, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, because we depend on that." The Canadian official told the Star that while all three negotiating teams agreed to continue talking, that will happen on a bilateral basis. But LeBlanc emphasized the importance of trilateral conversations too, and that Canada is ready to work to get to a renewal on an expedited basis, the source said. While the three national leaders were not in the meeting, U.S. President Donald Trump has long made clear he is not interested in an extension of the existing agreement, but wants fundamental changes made to it. At Canada Day celebrations in Ottawa, Carney did not directly address the trade talks, but invoked a united Canada as a force to be reckoned with, saying Canadians must face the world with courage. In a world where traditional alliances are crumbling, Canada has chosen to reach out and build new partnerships. We offer partnership in a divided world in security, trade, and culture, Carney said, announcing Canada would participate in Eurovision and would host the 2028 Francophonie Summit. The Prime Minister's trip to Edmonton for a Canada Day speech was canceled Wednesday evening after thunderstorms in Ottawa prevented his plane from taking off, his spokesperson told the Canadian press. Carney had said a day earlier an update to the CUSMA deal will take a lot more time to land and downplayed prospects of a New Deal that Trump would be required to seek congressional approval to pass. Jean Simard, head of the Aluminum Association of Canada, said that Mexico and Canada are in different negotiating positions. Mexico has a different balance sheet with the U.S. and a keen interest to play ball. Catherine Cobden, head of the Canadian Steel Producers Association, said this outcome is aligned with our expectations. For now, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement on Continental Free Trade, that's CUSMA, which governs one of the world's largest trading blocs, will continue to shelter most Canadian exports from the majority of American tariffs due to a tariff exemption Trump agreed to. But it does not apply to autos, steel, aluminum, copper, or lumber. Those products are subject to punishing surcharges ranging from 25% on autos up to 50% on important metals, which Trump has levied against all global imports in his bid to reshore American production and manufacturing. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and her team of negotiators led by Ebrard are already in formal rounds of negotiations with the U.S., and a third session is set for July 20. There is no confirmed date for the next Canada-U.S. bilateral discussion, nor for any next trilateral talks, according to the Canadian side. Ebrard told reporters he believes there is no difference between the countries that can't be resolved and emphasized there is still room for an agreement to be reached. Neither party said, "I'm not going to enter anymore." That didn't happen in the conversation, he said in Spanish. In North Dakota Wednesday, Trump touted his record as he helped dedicate the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. "I love making America great again. I mean, I'm having a good time." The president, who has slammed Canada and Mexico for lax border enforcement against illegal migration and fentanyl, said his tariffs and policies are boosting American security and prosperity. "We have the best border, strongest border. We went from the worst border in history in 3 months to the best border in history. So we do okay." The next article is under the byline of colorectal cancer. Ontario joins PEI to cut age limit for screening. And this is by Nicole Ireland. Ontario is the second province in Canada to lower the routine colorectal cancer screening age from 50 to 45. As of July 1, Ontarians age 45 and up are eligible to receive the at-home fecal immunochemical screening test, or FIT, that detects traces of blood in the stool. If someone has an abnormal result, they can be referred for a colonoscopy. Prince Edward Island was the first province to lower the screening age last March. Colorectal Cancer Canada President Barry Stein said colorectal cancer is on the rise among younger adults and can be prevented if polyps in the colon and rectum are detected early and removed. Both Stein and the Canadian Cancer Society are urging the other provinces and territories to follow PEI's and Ontario's lead, saying that the change will save lives as well as health care costs. "We should all be able to have the same advantages to prevent the disease, regardless of the province or territory that you live in," said Stein, who endured multiple surgeries after being diagnosed with colorectal cancer at age 41 in the 1990s. According to Cancer Care Ontario, 9 out of every 10 people can be cured when colorectal cancer is detected early. Stein said all the provinces are at various stages of looking at the numbers and considering the change for people with an average risk of colorectal cancer. The other provinces currently recommend FIT screening for people between age 50 and 74. People who are at above average risk of colorectal cancer generally get specialized screening, regardless of what province or territory they live in. Someone is considered at higher risk if one parent, sibling, or child had colorectal cancer before age 60, or if two family members had it at any age. And I need to pause once more to remind you that you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article is titled OPP Identify Man Killed in 1988 Crash as Missing Person. DNA Test Links Case to Unknown Victim. This is by Joshua Smith. A man who died in a motorcycle crash 38 years ago has been identified as someone who went missing months before the fatal incident. The OPP's Middlesex County Detachment got a report of a missing person on March 11, 1988, the police force said in a news release Tuesday. Bradley Verbeek, who was 19 years old at the time, was last seen on Exeter Road in London, Ontario, on December 8, 1987. Verbeek remained missing despite decades of investigation, the OPP said. Last year, investigators received new information from partner agencies indicating Bradley may have been involved in a fatal motorcycle crash in Toronto on May 12, 1988, according to the release. Police weren't able to identify the victim at the time, and he was eventually buried as an unknown man. However, on June 16, DNA testing confirmed the unknown male was Verbeek, and investigators notified his family, the OPP said. The DNA analysis was established through a multi-agency investigation led by the Middlesex County OPP's Crime Unit under the direction of the OPP Criminal Investigation Branch. That's the CIB. The police forces in Toronto and Hamilton, as well as the provincial and federal centers for missing persons, also assisted in the probe, among other entities including the Office of the Chief Coroner. While this outcome is tragic, it reflects the determination, perseverance, and collaboration of our investigators and partner agencies. OPP CIB Detective Inspector Nathan Parker said in a statement, "Every missing person matters. We remain committed to locating the missing, identifying the unknown, and helping families and loved ones find answers." Verbeek's sisters thanked those who supported the family throughout the ordeal. "For 38 years, my family lived with the heartbreak of not knowing what happened to my brother," Melissa Godwin said in a recorded statement accompanying the news release. "He wasn't just my brother, he was my best friend. Every day I thought about him and hoped that one day we would be reunited. I want to express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who supported us during our 38-year search for my brother. Although my parents are no longer here, I find comfort in knowing Bradley will finally rest beside them." Godwin said her father died on May 12, 2019, exactly 31 years after his son died, as police and the family only recently discovered. "The coincidence makes this moment especially meaningful for our family," she said. Sarah Diver is also one of Verbeek's sisters. She said she was deeply grateful to the law enforcement agencies whose dedication brought Bradley home to his family, giving them the answers they desperately needed and allowing him to finally rest in peace. Sometimes your gut knows what your heart can't explain. The universe has a way of sending signs, and when you refuse to give up on someone, closure has a way of finding you. The next article is titled Power Chord Patriot. Adams takes aim at Trump in new single, 51st State. And this is by Dania Yacoub. Searching for a new song for your Canada Day playlist? Canadian icon Bryan Adams may have just released one, perfect for celebrating Canada and bashing recent threats against the country. The Kingston-born singer-songwriter released 51st State on Tuesday, seemingly with one listener in mind, Donald Trump, who has stated time and again his preposterous desire to absorb Canada into the United States. Let me give you some advice, Mr. Adams sings. We'll never be the 51st state. In a statement accompanying the singer's release, Adams' team called the song, which showcases the singer's trademark driving guitar and raspy vocals, a tribute to the people, communities, and values that have shaped the country from coast to coast to coast. I wanted to write something about Canada because Canada is home, Adams said. There is more that binds us than divides us. This is a tribute to the pride and spirit of many fellow Canadians. The rest is just noise. Over the speakers, the 66-year-old's new anthem bears more than a passing resemblance to Summer of '69, the mega hit 1984 single Adams is best known for. It has more than 150 million views on YouTube. The new track pairs that classic sound with lyrics chock full of messages to Trump. Let me give it to you straight. When you're talking about my home, you better show some respect, 'cause up here we take care of our own. Adams sings to rocking high-tempo guitars. Adams also tells Trump in verse he can load Canada up with tariffs, but Canada will never be the 51st state. Perhaps fitting for an artist synonymous with nostalgia, Adams' lyrics include nods to the good old days of Canadian-American friendship too, singing, "Maybe you've forgotten, maybe you just don't care, but we always stick beside you for that liberty we share." The earworm recalls last year's Elbows Up Canada Day celebrations, just months after Trump had taken office for the second time, already having made annexation, quote, jokes, unquote, multiple times. Canadians countrywide felt a greater need to be openly patriotic. Trump's latest 51st state tirade came last month when he posted the threat to his platform Truth Social late at night, linking to a Bloomberg story reporting Canada has dipped into a technical recession for the first time since 2020. U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, who previously shrugged off Trump's 51st state talking as joking, had reposted the president's comment on X. In the YouTube comments, Canadians praised Adams for sticking up for the country, while American fans of the singer sent apologies on their president's behalf. The next article is titled, Bad Weather Keeps PM from Delivering Speech in Alberta. This is by Dylan Robertson. Ottawa. Prime Minister Mark Carney urged Canadians to remain united in a Canada Day speech in the nation's capital on Wednesday, but his plan to deliver similar remarks in Edmonton later in the day was upended by thunderstorms that prevented his plane from taking off on time. Canadians gathered across the country to mark 159 years of Confederation as the country grapples with a changing world and emerging separatist movements. In Ottawa, Carney said the country was formed on partnership and accommodation rather than assimilation and domination. He spoke to thousands gathered at a short drive from Parliament Hill just moments before a prolonged storm canceled official events, including the evening fireworks. Carney said Canadians have stood strong and unflinching in the face of global challenges, working together resolutely to build our future. Because in a crisis, fortune favors the bold. The founding idea of Canada is simple. Unity does not require uniformity, he said in French. In Quebec, a separation movement has been re-emerging ahead of the province's October election. Carney was scheduled to deliver a speech at Canada Day celebration in Edmonton Wednesday evening. It was to have been a rare Alberta appearance for the Prime Minister on Canada Day, and comes as Albertans are to vote this fall on whether to remain in Canada or hold a binding referendum on separation. His spokesperson said weather conditions in Ottawa prevented his plane from taking off and he would not make it to Edmonton on time to deliver his speech there, and his appearance was canceled. Thunderstorms rolled through Ottawa for most of Wednesday afternoon, bringing strong winds, extremely heavy rain, lightning, and threats of hail. More than a dozen flights out of the Ottawa airport were canceled due to the weather. The Prime Minister began the day's celebration on Wednesday, serving pancakes in his own riding in the Ottawa suburbs. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took part in Canada Day events in Alberta and posted on social media that he was among those proudly celebrating our country's 159th birthday with the Western spirit of hard work, freedom, family, and community. Carney's speech in Ottawa also paid homage to Jeremy Hansen, the only Canadian to make the historic trip around the dark side of the moon earlier this year aboard NASA's Artemis II mission. Hansen took the stage after Carney greeting a crowd of several thousand people at the day's main festivities held in a field at Le Breton Flats Park due to construction on Parliament Hill. When I look out at all of you, I see the same, a country powerful, together as one, like a crew, through shared sacrifice, mutual reliance, and a commitment to a collective vision much larger than any single one of us, he said. Carney and other dignitaries wore portable fans around their necks during the noon ceremony as the Mercury soared. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was among the dignitaries seated at the front of the stage. He did not address the crowd, but stopped to pose for photos. The next article is titled Official Undermines GOP Border Claims. Washington. U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials told a hearing on Capitol Hill Tuesday that there's been a significant drop in drug seizures at the border with Canada. Acting Deputy Chief Jason Schneider also told the House Border Security and Enforcement Subcommittee that there's been a decline in the number of apprehensions of undocumented immigrants. The testimony came as Republican lawmakers made claims that Mexican cartels are looking to Canada as the United States cracks down on smuggling at its southern border. Members of the Trump administration have made similar allegations despite U.S. government data showing a minuscule volume of fentanyl being seized at the border with Canada compared with Mexico. And I need to pause one last time to remind you you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article is titled Deportees from U.S. May Not Find Refuge Here. Ottawa has tightened rules for entry as Trump administration gets okay to remove migrants. This is by Nicholas Keong. The United States Supreme Court has given the Trump administration the green light to deport more than 1 million migrants and keep asylum seekers out, should Canada be concerned. Last week, the court ruled that President Donald Trump can end a humanitarian program that offers temporary refuge to hundreds of thousands of Haitians and Syrians, opening the door to revoking the status of nationals from more countries. The court also sanctioned the U.S. border practice of metering to turn back asylum seekers at its official ports of entry. While experts were not surprised by the decisions of a court dominated by conservative appointees, a new wave of migrants arriving at the Canadian land border, whether at ports of entry or via irregular routes, is widely anticipated, despite Ottawa's recent changes to restrict asylum eligibility and end irregular migration in between official ports of entry. The boost for Trump's hardline immigration agenda has again renewed the debate over whether the U.S. is a safe country for refugees, and therefore whether Ottawa should get out of the bilateral agreement that allows Canada to turn back potential refugees who arrive at its shared border on the premise that they should pursue their claims first in the U.S. Some people may indeed try to come to Canada, said Queen's University Administrative and Immigration Law Professor Sherry Aiken. There have been other programs that have ended and been canceled in the United States, and we did see movements across the border. Now it is much different, but that's not to say it won't happen. So there may be a surge in crossings. The Canada Border Services Agency said it won't speculate on how foreign government policies are going to influence the flow of migration. However, it said it is closely monitoring the border and is ready to handle an influx that could quickly reverse the downward trend for claims Ottawa has boasted about in the past year. As of June 21, CBSA said its officers have processed 6,982 asylum applications compared to 16,256 at the same time in 2025, representing a 57% reduction. To date this year, 710 asylum claimants, 309 of them having entered irregularly between ports of entry, crossed into Canada, were found ineligible for asylum and sent back to the U.S. In March, Ottawa passed Bill C-12, among other changes, to ban irregular migrants entering from the U.S. between land ports of entry from the right to asylum. Instead, those who manage to enter undetected will only get paper reviews by immigration with regards to the likelihood their lives would be at risk if returned to their country. Crossing the border between ports of entry is illegal and dangerous and does not provide any benefit to a person's asylum claim, the border agency told The Star. Failure to report to the CBSA upon arrival in Canada is a serious offense and may result in penalties or charges. In the event an influx creates a need for additional on-site space, the agency said it will activate plans to lease additional space as a processing center for refugee claimants. Ottawa-based immigration lawyer Heather Neufeld said uprooting one's life in the U.S. for an uncertain future in Canada is a difficult decision because migrants losing their temporary protected status under the American court decision have established roots in the U.S., many even with children who are U.S. citizens. While some have close family ties in Canada and are allowed to come for asylum, they may not be familiar with the required documents for the exemption under the Canada-U.S. Safe Third Country Agreement, which dictates that migrants make their refugee claims in the country where they first arrived. Neufeld said she has seen people eligible for the exemption who still ended up wrongly denied at the Canadian border, handed over to U.S. and detained for removal. In most cases, a turn back by Canada is simply an immediate pipeline to deportation, she noted. People have to evaluate their options very carefully and not assume that Canada is going to be a feasible option. Although Canada has suspended or deferred removals of people from 22 countries due to instability in those regions, migrants from these places don't get a risk assessment until they are ready to be deported. That means they will be stuck in prolonged limbo, Neufeld noted. Haiti, Syria, and Ukraine are all on Canada's no removal list. She said there needs to be information put out in different migrant communities to help them understand the state of Canadian law amid all the misinformation spun by bad actors. Vancouver-based immigration lawyer Erica Olmsted said Canadian border officers have the discretion to let people in by issuing them temporary resident permits, in spite of the Canada-U.S. bilateral asylum ban, if they believe protection is not being afforded. However, that discretion does not seem to be happening, she added. Anyone losing their temporary protected status in the U.S. should first look at the options there and then weigh it against what's available in Canada before dashing to the border, warned Olmsted. To me, the solution is going to be in litigation because Canada does have a charter that is supposed to provide protection, said Olmsted. Aisling Bondi, president of the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers, believes the U.S. court decisions will further strengthen the pending legal challenges against the Safe Third Country Agreement before Canadian courts. The U.S. Supreme Court decision shows just how bad the situation for refugees and migrants is getting in the United States, and just how much Canada is breaching our human rights obligations by not allowing people to make refugee claims at the Canadian border, she said. Aiken of Queens said this is the moment for Canada to suspend the bilateral agreement. If not, she added, Ottawa should at least amend the proposed regulations of Bill C-12 to build in more exceptions so that people could retain access to asylum based on appropriate circumstances. I'm going to end here with an opinion piece by Althea Raj, Carney's novel solution for 24 Sussex. How far will Canada's Prime Minister go to avoid headlines with a multi-million-dollar figure attached to the words 24 Sussex Drive? Embarrassingly far. Last week, Mark Carney announced plans to restore the Prime Minister's official residence without providing a budget for the massive project. I don't want to be too forward on what the budget is for this because, in many respects, that's part of the competition, he told reporters. Public Works and Procurement Canada was even clearer. It is premature to establish a cost estimate, it said last Friday. What government plans a multi-million-dollar project, think north of $100 million with security costs, with no dollar range in mind? To sidestep the political hot potato of being seen to spend taxpayers' dollars on his own residence, Carney pledged to never live in the completed home and handed decisions for the requirements of the project to the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. That non-accountable body will determine, for example, if the home should be open to the public, if it is a working residence for the Prime Minister as well as their staff, if the dining room should be large enough for state dinners, if the pool should be kept, or how the stone facade is maintained. Carney is also given an independent jury power to select the winning bid. And turning to the Rideau Hall Foundation to raise money for all or most of the costs of the project. The foundation said this week, 4 days after Carney's announcement, that it hopes to raise $50 million. Is that the budget? The Carney government told the Star that the cost of the project is dependent on the success of the fundraising effort. If more money is raised, the project could be larger, said spokesperson Laurent de Cazeneuve. For a prime minister who has no trouble making decisions and is running the largest deficits in Canadian history outside of the pandemic, the fact Carney wants us to believe he is launching a project with no budget is simply not credible. But Carney is far from the only prime minister to want to disassociate himself from 24 Sussex Drive's multi-million-dollar costs. Since Brian Mulroney upgraded the home in the mid-1980s, concerns over a redo of Gucci Gate, so dubbed for the renovations that included necessary maintenance as well as luxurious add-ons, such as a custom closet that reportedly held 84 pairs of shoes, including 50 pairs of Gucci loafers. Prime ministers have gone to great lengths not to be seen to spend taxpayers' money on it. Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin both deferred major maintenance, instead showcasing the residence's windows with plastic-style wrap to keep the cold air out. After Stephen Harper moved in with his wife and 2 children, Auditor General Sheila Fraser recommended they move out for 12 to 15 months to allow for $10 million worth of necessary work, some of which hadn't been done in 50 years. Despite warnings that delays are likely to result in further deterioration and higher costs, Harper refused. Instead, his children lived in a home with mold, lead paint walls, asbestos, heating and cooling issues, bad plumbing, and knob and tube wiring that was described in a 2011 report for the National Capital Commission, that's NCC, obtained by the National Post as a fire trap that posed a major life safety risk to the Prime Minister and his family. When Harper left office, the price tag for the deferred work had more than doubled. Prominent Canadians were calling for the residence to be leveled. The NCC was reimagining the project and proposing new solutions to deal with increasing security concerns: a hardening shell to protect the house from truck bombs, a marine evacuation bat cave, safe haven command center underneath the home, like the White House's Situation Room. Unfortunately, I cannot finish this article. I'll just go to the end where it says, in the end, taxpayers will still pick up a large part of the bill, whether through security costs or through charitable tax credits given to those with the means to donate. And I will end with, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 2nd issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.